that has just been set up, not quite a year old yet, but that's where they send folks who've been arrested for low-level nonviolent offenses, and instead of sending them to jail, they send them over to this mental health diversion center, and that's been a very interesting program, looks pretty successful so far. But all of that sort of begs the question of, if you've got a loved one or a good friend who you know has some mental health issues, not seeking treatment, resistant perhaps even, but you were worried that that individual could hurt themselves or someone else, then people think about the possibility of a civil commitment, maybe to keep them out of the criminal justice system. And so you're here to talk to us about all of that. Facebook friends, if you've got questions, we encourage you to start typing them and sending them in so you can ask the judge directly yourself. But maybe you could start us off with just a little bit of a background about the whole process and how many people, you know, do seek civil commitment. How often does it happen?
Sure. So in Harris County, all civil mental health proceedings are administered by Probate Court number 3, which has the primary responsibility for all mental health proceedings in the county. Probate Court 4 hears some hearings also, but it's Probate Court 3 that does all of the staffing, all of the administration, from start to finish, really, for a civil commitment. So a civil commitment really starts one of 3 ways. A person who's a guardian for a proposed patient, somebody who has legal responsibility to make decisions for that person, can take that person to a mental health facility if they're exhibiting signs of mental illness, and also that they might be a danger to themselves or other people. And while they're there, they can file an application for emergency detention, which will result in a preparation of a potential warrant, which the court will review and sign. So that's one of the entryways into the system. But it's not just a guardian that can file an application for an emergency detention. Any adult, any person who's over the age of 18 who has personal knowledge of somebody who appears to be demonstrating some kind of mental illness, appears to be a substantial, serious risk of harm to themselves or other people, they can also go down and file an application for emergency detention. And that'll result in law enforcement coming out and taking the person and transporting them not to jail, but to a mental health facility. Law enforcement on their own also, if they have witnessed something that appears to be looks to be mentally ill, or is exhibiting signs that lead them to believe that they're a danger to themselves or another person, they can also apprehend that person and take them, again, not to a jail but to a mental health facility. So that's really your entryway into the system, and I would want to underscore that if you see somebody who's actively homicidal or suicidal, call 911. And both the city of Houston and Harris County have teams, specialized teams of law enforcement personnel who can go out and apprehend these people in a safe way, so that the patient doesn't get hurt, the law enforcement officer doesn't get hurt, and anybody in the nearby area doesn't get hurt as well. So it's really important when you're contacting law enforcement to let them know that you think that there's some kind of nexus with mental illness.
Yeah, as you were telling me earlier, so when you call 911, start with the information. You know, this individual seems to have some mental health issues, and I apologize, one second. Brandon, I'm going to ask our producer, not sure why, but I'm not getting our Facebook page, and I know we've got to have some questions coming in from our Facebook friends, so maybe I could ask you to, I'd figure that out. Brandon's going to, IT, I've just called IT in. Oh dear, and now I've dropped a microphone, so sorry. All right, so last year, you were saying how many people had?
That's right. So there were over 14,000 applications for mental health proceedings in Harris County. And this year, in the first 6 months, we're on track to have over 15,000. And those are both record-breaking numbers.
Wow.
They only appear to be going up. It's Harris County is the county with the largest number of mental health proceedings in Texas by far. I think we're double the next nearest county.
Really? I mean, obviously we're a huge county, but
we are
not double. That's interesting. I mean, in terms of population. There we go. Thank you. All righty. Let's see if we can go ahead and scroll down and find some. How many? So of those, how many are granted and how many are denied? I guess would be an interesting.
Well. The majority are not granted, but that's not because they don't come to a final hearing. The majority aren't granted because once a person is apprehended and gets into the system and gets some treatment, they're very often discharged by the hospital. The goal of mental health treatment, at least in this context, is to be as least invasive as you possibly can and yet most effective. And that doesn't mean that you keep somebody in a hospital if they're better. You need to discharge them. So most of them don't come to a final hearing. A final hearing is the commitment hearing where you're going to be involuntarily committed for up to 90 days. It's usually 45 days. but that's the beginning of the process. Most of them don't end up at the very end of the process.
So hopefully people have gotten help between the
Hopefully people have gotten help. And very often they get help immediately once we're taken in to the first mental health facility and get some observation and some treatment.
Okay. All right, so we're getting some questions. Catherine is asking, what about elderly agitated individuals? Would that be the same process?
It depends on what the agitation is related to. If it's a dementia or an Alzheimer's, that's not a mental illness. So a mental illness would be something like a bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. Elderly people do end up in the mental health system for mental illnesses. Somebody who has maybe dementia or Alzheimer's, that's a route you need to go down with for a guardianship proceeding, which is also something that the probate courts do.
You would also talk to these people?
We do. So there's 4 probate courts in Harris County. Courts 3 and 4 deal with mental health, but all 4 deal with guardianship. Okay. So you may need to file an application for a guardianship for somebody who's elderly but not mentally ill. Okay. And one of the easy ways to kind of get that process started would be to file an information letter with the court. What will happen then is the court will send out a court investigator and investigate whether there's a need for a guardianship or if other agencies like APS need to be involved.
Okay. And just how long typically, from the time I send a letter and ask for the help to disposition, about how much time?
We try and act pretty quickly. Okay. If you alert the court to an emergency situation, we'll get out there as quickly as we can. And that's something about the probate courts that we're very responsive to the public, and we have, our doors are open. We are there to try and help you through this process. Many of the personnel in my court have social work backgrounds. They're all there because they have a real desire to work in this area of the law. So we really see it as part of our mission to help people as much as be a court and do the other things that a court does.
Sure. But in terms of a number for like guardianship for an elderly parent, say, how much time are you talking?
From a start to finish, if you need to have the guardianship, a guardianship established, it can be a few months because you have to appoint a guardian ad litem sometimes and an attorney ad litem in each case in order to represent either the best interest of that proposed ward or to be an advocate for what that proposed ward wants, because the person may have dementia or Alzheimer's and still not want a guardianship. And we are in the business of providing due process to the most vulnerable among us. So if that's their desire, we take it seriously and we want to give them a chance to be heard in court. Okay.
Fair enough. All righty. So Patty had the same question, kind of talking about that, about the elderly. Kenneth says, thanks for the great advice. Sure. Marcy's making a reference with the Jester units, which is the TDCJ criminal system. Right. Natasha saying this is good to know. Marjorie giving us a shout out, saying hello. Hi, Marjorie. Let's see, some other comments. Karen says, wow, we need more probate courts in Houston.
Probate courts in Harris County, and
right.
That is something that comes up from time to time. Do we need a 5th probate court? I don't know that we have an answer to that.
Yeah, okay, there's probably a lot. Debbie is saying hi, Tammy, wow, Margaret, hello, a couple of other hellos from Antoinette, Dawn, Rose, Brenda. So a lot of people out there kind of saying hi, listening in, which is terrific. So you're going to, let's say you're going to do this. You want to apply for a civil commitment for your loved one. Can you walk us through that process? Like, do I need to have certain documents? Do I need to have something from my doctor or my loved one's doctor?
At the point where we left off, the person has been picked up on a warrant and they're at the first mental health facility and they're being detained for a period of 48 hours. During that 48 hours, they need to be seen by a physician within the first 12. And really at that point, the person who has brought the case to the court's attention and to law enforcement's attention doesn't need to participate too much. I mean, they may come as a witness at the final hearing, which is a mini trial for these patients, but very often the person who will apply for involuntary mental health services, temporary mental health services, will be one of the treating physicians, and those applications are prosecuted by the county attorney's office. So as far as coming to the court with your documentation, that's not something you really need to do. When you go and you file an application for a warrant, certainly when you're filling out the warrant, you want to be as fact specific as possible. You want to explain why you believe this person has a mental illness, what behaviors they're exhibiting that are a danger to themselves or to other people, because we review all of those warrants.
And do you have to go to the court specifically to do it, or can you do it online? How does that part work?
So you can't do it online. You go to the Harris County Psychiatric Center, which is at 2800 South McGregor Way, just off 288, kind of on the edge of the medical center. And the clerk in the court there can help walk you through the process of filing out the necessary paperwork.
How much time should you allot for that first step?
So for that first step, you should probably allot maybe 4 hours. Hopefully it can be done quicker, because what you're going to need to do is you're going to fill out that paperwork, which is going to be under oath.
Okay.
And
I
then
swear.
That paperwork,
I swear.
that's right. That's important. And then that paperwork is going to get transmitted to the court, and either I'm going to review it, or Judge Amy Parsons, the associate judge for Court 3, is going to review it. And we're going to make a determination whether there's allegations on that document that that we feel comfortable sending out a law enforcement officer to come and pick up this person and detain them, because that's a serious thing to do to a person. So we want to take our time and review that. So that's kind of the beginning to end point of just the beginning.
Right. So subsequent to that, so let's say you decide Jimmy should be picked up.
Right.
Deputy Constable goes and picks him up, brings him to a mental health facility. From that time forward, is additional paperwork required? Do you need to get a physician to sign off?
So not additional paperwork by the family, but what's going to happen is that person's going to be detained in a mental health facility, and then usually a physician is going to file some kind of pleading with the court or some kind of document with the court that's going to say that they need to be detained for their own health until you can get to that final hearing. And so that's going to result in usually what's called an order for protective custody. So the order for protective custody is going to keep that patient in the hospital until they get to the final hearing, which can be as late as 30 days away.
Okay. And at that point, do you need to have any additional paperwork, or is it again on your oath?
You're on your oath.
Okay.
Very often at final hearings, people want to come down and testify and give information to the court, and that's always very helpful. And a patient has all of the due process rights that anybody else has at these hearings too. They're appointed an ad litem at the probable cause stage. They're allowed to put on their own witnesses, cross-examine witnesses, or bring whatever other information to the court's attention they feel is necessary to prevail in their case, if that's what they're trying to do.
Okay. This is a big question. Marcy is asking, Marcy, I know a lot of people want the answer to this question. So if a person is admitted, gets civil commitment, goes to that to the mental health facility, say for 30 days, who pays? Am I responsible for that?
Harris County usually pays.
Wow, okay.
Now, if you're in a private facility and you have Medicare or private insurance, now those are different situations.
Okay.
But as
so if
far
I have insurance or whatever.
if you have insurance, that's a different situation. But Harris County is who pays the bills for that.
Okay. If you're going
at the Harris County Psychiatric Center.
If you go to the Harris County facility, Harris County will pick up the tab on that.
That's right.
Okay. All right. So don't let cost be the big deterrent to seeking appropriate care.
Absolutely. You should not let cost be the guiding decision in getting somebody mental health care.
Because it'll be a lot more expensive potentially on the back end.
It will, and your quality of life in the meantime amounts for something also.
Yes, it does. Okay. So Alan saying hi. Hello, Alan. Lisa asks, who becomes the guardianship? I guess whoever applies then becomes
Whoever
the guardian?
applies. So guardianship, we're talking about separate and apart from mental health proceedings. So in a guardianship, usually there's an applicant, very often a family member. Sometimes these are contested. Somebody might say, that person's just trying to take advantage of them. I should be the guardian. So we can have guardianship disputes. If we get involved with a situation with a group of people who are fighting to be guardian, so to speak, we might end up with a third-party guardian. We might end up with a private professional guardian. And Harris County has a Harris County guardianship program for indigent people as well.
Okay, righty. Let's see what else we got here. I'm looking for. Okay, Catherine, this is a big question too. Thank you, Catherine. So what happens if there are no beds available at a county facility?
Well, they will find a bed eventually. So they have ways of just not releasing people for lack of beds. I wouldn't let that be a barrier to your coming into the system and looking for help.
So a bed will be found, maybe not today, but
maybe not today, and maybe not at the facility where you are, but they're not going to deny somebody a
bed. Okay.
Treatment just for lack of a spot.
Okay, all righty. Well, there you go, Catherine. Let's see. Hello, Kimberly. Hello from Spring, Lottie. Okay. Now, Jack is saying that he believes involuntary hospitalization is often inhumane, treatment of someone who just needs rest, and he thinks that it can increase the chance of suicide.
It's not cruel.
Okay.
For people who need treatment, it can be a godsend. And let's talk about what kind of treatment you're likely to get at a mental health facility. It's usually maybe talk therapy, group therapy, medication. We really kind of have some ideas about what mental health treatment are that may not be what modern mental health treatment really are. And it's quite humane. The people that are involved in the mental health system in Harris County have devoted their lives to this. And usually you'll find that people who get involved in mental health in general have some kind of background that's touched them to move them to get into this area. They've either had a family member, they've had some kind of brush with it in the past that has brought out within them this compassion that wants them to be there in the first place.
Okay. All righty. And I suppose it is fair to say that mental health treatment has come a long way in a generation. So, you know, maybe
I couldn't agree more.
maybe to keep that in mind. All right. Well, okay, so Diane is asking about a person who's been in and out of mental health services but won't take their medications, living in hazardous conditions, vulnerable to others on the street. That certainly seems to be the case with a large,
very
90+% of our homeless population.
And you know, and when we talk about somebody who's a danger to themselves, it's not just somebody who's actively suicidal. If you are not taking care of yourself, you can become a danger to yourself. If you're elderly and you're living on the street and you're really engaged in some behavior that high-risk behavior, you could be a danger to yourself. If you say you're diabetic and you're mentally ill and you're insulin dependent and you don't take that medication, I think you're a danger to yourself.
All right. Diane is asking actually if this kind of service is available in Tarrant County up in the Dallas area.
It is.
Okay.
The
judge
throughout
knows.
Texas.
All righty.
They've got very, very good courts there in Tarrant County as well.
All righty. So hopefully, Diane, that is helpful to you. Let me see what other questions we have. Cobbin is asking about if individuals are combative. Do they have lockdown units for combative individuals?
So they do for combative individuals, and that's a good point to bring up, and it really kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier when you're calling 911 to get law enforcement involved. If you see something like that, let law enforcement know, because they've got such good, highly trained officers that can go out and pick up these people safely and get them to the mental health facility where they can get the help that they need.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, you know, we were talking about this earlier, but I think it's going to be Precinct 1,
Precinct 1 does very, a large percentage of all of the mental health transports, and that's whether that's taking a patient from hospital to hospital or bringing them to the Harris County Psychiatric Center to have their final hearing. So Probate Court 3 actually has a courtroom in the Harris County Psychiatric Center, and that's where we hold our final hearings.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. And by the way, Harris County Psychiatric Hospital did the groundbreaking today.
I was out there today.
There you go. 11 o'clock this morning, a brand new facility going up another 230 beds?
Something like that. And it's going to be a continuum of care, so it's going to have all kinds of levels of treatment for mentally ill persons.
Yeah, so maybe another 2 years or so before it's, knocking on wood, but that's great. Continue to expand.
That's right.
And the Precinct 1 group, we know a couple of deputies actually who work that unit. If I remember right, they told me there are about 30 deputies who, that's what they do, high-risk mental health patients. They do the transport.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, they talk about how actually it's a matter of knowing how to talk to people, kind of talking them down from sometimes potentially dangerous situations.
And it's wonderful that law enforcement is taking that approach in mental illness cases.
Yeah. Marcy, you answered her question earlier, so she said thank you both for the information and bringing awareness. Big heart there, such a huge need for this population of citizens. Catherine saying this personally has saved my sister's life many, many times.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, Judge.
All right.
That's nice.
Thank you, Harris County.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. Looks like Boo has a question here. Let me see if I can. He says treatment for individuals that need help is a good idea versus just locking them up. Sometimes individuals that get in trouble don't know they did, and what they did, as they don't know any better at the moment.
And I think you're seeing the trend for that. If you look at the Emmett Center for the Diversion Center, I think that we're starting now to really recognize that it does no good to the patient or to or to society to lock somebody up who's mentally ill, trying to divert them for low-level offenses, of course. It really does lead to better long-term results.
Yeah. The prosecutor from the district attorney's office we were speaking with, Denise Onken, she runs the mental health unit for the DA's office, and she was talking about, because you've got a criminal trespass, nonviolent, low level, maybe he's done some damage, and everybody knows there's no way the business or property owner is going to get any restitution for that.
Right.
It's not like this, say, homeless individual has any resources to pay back for the damage. And it was stunning to me, but in the jail, I mean, there are people who have been through the system, arrested 60, 70, 80 times for these offenses.
That's
They've got mental health issues, they're trespassing, small nonviolent crimes, and the expense is tremendous.
It really is.
To kind of keep them going through the system.
So yeah, it's a third way, and it's already shown some real promising results. So I can only hope that it's going to continue to improve.
Yeah, we will see. Our fingers are crossed. DA says it saved $9 million to law enforcement in the first 7-8 months it's been operating.
That's
and
amazing.
Last month they expanded the potential offenses, from just criminal trespass to small theft offenses, some other things like that. So we'll see. It's still an experiment.
That's right.
I get jury, as you might say, not fully in on it,
That's
but
right.
people are looking.
Right.
So let me take a peek, see if there might be any other questions. Yeah, they say they have had 1,300 diversions so far since the program began last September. So these are individuals who, instead of going to jail, went to the Harris County Diversion Center, Ed Emmett's Diversion Center. And of course, the former Harris County judge, a huge advocate for mental health. He has really done so much in that area. He used to joke, people always ask me about the Astrodome. What's the fate of the Astrodome? Am I passionate about the Astrodome? And I remember him saying, the Astrodome is just something we have to take care of. I'm passionate about the issue of mental health in this county. Now, let's see if we've got any other questions. If not, we might be wrapping it up, so let me take a quick peek. I will take another look. Let's see. All right. Is there anything else you want to add, Judge? Just with, we've talked a lot.
I would just say, if you are someone who's experiencing these problems, or you have a loved one who is, reach out for some help. Our doors at the court are always open. We're there to help the people of Harris County, and we're happy to do it. I know it's scary sometimes to call a court, but we're there for you.
Right. You know what? Before we go, real quick, you did make a point earlier that if there is a mental health commitment, I mean, there's some, because you were saying it's important to review these cases carefully. There is a potential impact, and I think people should know about
Sure,
this.
there are some consequences to having a mental health commitment on your record. You can lose the ability to own a firearm. If you are in a profession where you're licensed, that license could be at risk. If you are like a transportation worker, someone who works at a refinery, somebody who has to have some level of clearance in order to work there, a mental health commitment could affect that. You could apply to get that license back over time, but it's maybe not something you want to risk without at least not knowing the consequences before you embark on this process.
So in that instance, maybe it would be better to seek help by yourself?
You can always seek help on your own in a voluntary way. Unfortunately, most people who are in this position don't.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. All right, just so that everybody knows what, everything's on the table out there. Yeah. All right, Judge Jason Cox.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, Facebook friends, until next time, ciao.